Hello again, sweet listener. Welcome back to a different kind of hex. Have you been gaming? Have you rolled the bones? We have done so here on the podcast. I'm Ian. I use he, him pronouns, and my co-host is...
José, also he, him pronouns. Happy to be here.
And tonight we have a special guest. She is a writer, an editor, a contributor to games such as The Between, Public Access, and Blades 68, which I think was referenced very favorably by Karen 12s when she was on the show recently. It's our fellow Open Hearth member, Elle. Elle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You and I and Jose have recently we're basically just about to wrap up a quarterly length game that we're playing together. So we've had a lot of opportunity to kind of bounce off of each other and sort of get a feeling for our sensibilities. So I think this episode is going to be a really interesting deep dive because we are diving deep today. We are diving deep. We are going to be talking about the hidden depths of the player character. Our topic this evening is player character interiority, how it is shown in the course of play, how it can imply this or that about the player character, what are the best methods to show it by, if there are any. But before we get into that particularly woolly thicket, Elle, you play a lot of games. Am I right?
I do. Probably too many. I think my partner would probably say too many.
Okay, well, we're going to suspend that value judgment for right now. You play enough games that you probably have a pretty strong sense of what you like and what you don't like. Is that true?
I do think I have a strong sense of my taste, but I think my tastes are also pretty broad. I would say the constant for me is that I definitely am drawn to darker games, darker themes, darker story beats. I love high drama games. I love melodrama and violence. And I love it when something spooky is happening. So I'm definitely a big horror games girl. But even more broadly than that, I really like games with strong vibes. I'm a very literary player in some senses, so I really love when I come away from a session and it feels like there is a thematic through line, and because of the way people were reincorporating and sort of refracting one another's ideas off of each other, we really came up with something cohesive, even though we were making it up on the spot. That's like my biggest joy in gaming.
A particularly potent poison.
Concentrated poison.
Yes.
Could you give us an example of a game that you've been playing in or maybe even running recently that has really given you that sense?
Yeah, I think I'd mentioned the game that the three of us are playing together, Fathom, a pseudo forged in the dark game about people who have the ability to descend into this sort of unreality and solve problems in this sort of surreal subconscious space almost. We had a session recently where the main problem, so to speak, was about an older woman who had lost touch with her children and who had sort of sunk into a despair that became sort of literalized in this surreal subconscious space. And we went in there into her memories of being a young woman in the Philippines to help her. And the way that the various players sort of tied in the themes from that core issue into their own characters. We had one player who had a strained, or one player character who had a strained relationship with their own mother, who was really bringing a lot of pathos to the situation. We had one player character who had recently struck up a romance with a pet shop owner and had a strange encounter with a bird there. We had lots of bird motifs in the subconscious memory world. Just the way that these disparate elements tied together felt really satisfying for me and creates a really interesting space for thinking about my own character and figuring out new things about them that I can then also tie in or throw into the soup that we're all creating.
And I have to say, you are extremely good at that, Elle. You are really a master, I think, of implying so much about your character's interiority with only a few lines or a very limited exchange.
It's interesting. I was going to say it's interesting, that game in the context of our topic tonight, because the setting is, as you've said, Elle, a surreal kind of exploration or delving. What's the term is drifting, drifting down into really the collective unconscious or the subconscious, whatever you want to call it. So nothing could be more interior, but in the process of that, we are describing actions and happenings within within the subconscious surreal dreamscape, maybe you would call it. And so there's a kind of interiority that is already being represented explicitly within the action of the game. So it's an interesting one in terms of thinking about our topic for the day. But before we get to that, Ian, do you want to talk about what your latest poison is?
I would love to talk about what my latest poison is. Our guest on the previous episode, Danny, had hinted in a very mysterious and sort of enticing fashion that he was working on a game of his own. And that he was in the playtesting phase. I believe there have been multiple rounds of playtesting on the Open Hearth. If you would like to sign up for such games, listener, you know where to find us. We'll put all of the Open Hearth's contact information in the show notes. There have been multiple rounds of playtesting for this game. And I get to participate in the current phase of testing that Danny is doing. And the game is changing all the time. From session to session, he's changing things as we make decisions, as he sees these kind of mechanics and mechanisms that he's put in place working, either the way that he intended them to or not. And so every time I come back to the game, the character keeper, the spreadsheet that we use to organize play, is different. And I find this to be a really exciting, a thrilling experience, because it always keeps me on my toes. It always keeps me in a sort of quantum state where the previously decided upon reality for the character could be washed away by these changes, these mechanical changes that Danny is making. It really forces me to consider who the character is outside of the scaffolding that you normally get. These stats, and you have these special abilities, and you have these pre-generated relationships like we've talked about before, Jose, with games like Hearts of Wulin. When all of that is changing, I really have to keep a strong sense of who the person is. And I find it to be a stimulating exercise for me in maintaining a really strong image. And the game is sick as hell. It fucking rips. It's so cool. I'm keeping mum for right now about all the specifics, because I think that's Danny's story to tell when he gets there. But I really, really can't wait for everybody to get a glimpse at this really, really cool game that Danny is making.
Does the game have a title yet?
It does. I don't know if it's subject to change.
Oh, okay.
But based on what Elle was talking about as far as her poisons earlier, darkness, weird body stuff, body horror, body transformation, It seems like it will be a favorite of yours.
Okay.
At such time as you get access to it.
Very excited.
Jose, what is doing it for you these days? What's your poison? What's intoxicating you?
I am in a game of Mythic Bastionlands, which is a game of courtly romance, kind of, knights on pilgrimages and exploring myths and such. And it's a game that's been ongoing for about a year, and I just joined at the beginning of this year. What's interesting to me about it, and what's like really engaging me quite a bit, is we play for 1 month in what the usual way might be, which is, synchronously. But then we take a month off from that and we do play by post for a month. And then we come back together and we do another month of in-person, quote unquote, online in person. So the play by post, I've never done play by post before. And so what's really interesting to me is the rhythms are varied depending upon, what we're doing.
Can you briefly describe what play-by-post is for someone who does not know what it is?
Sure. So play-by-post is an asynchronous way of playing where rather than congregating together online or in person, participants post to a forum, or in this case, a Discord channel, and we post asynchronously. And so I might post a scene or a description of something my character does, and then another player will post a response to it. You can also do things like roll dice and do it all asynchronously. And so in this particular situation, what we do is we have two channels. One's an out of character channel and one's an in character channel. So the out of character channel is for more of the kind of writing room. Oh, who's going to do this? Oh, do you think we should do this? That kind of negotiation at the player level. And that lets the in-game channel, it's called, just be the narrative itself.
Wow.
And so it creates a certain purity to that narrative. It flows without us having to kind of pull out of it and talk about it. So if you just want the story itself, it's right there on the in-game channel. And so that's been really cool to have that. I guess I'd call it a back channel where we can negotiate what's going to happen or what we'd like to pursue. And then to have the channel the in-game channel where the actual narrative happens. And so what I was saying about pacing and rhythm is, at some level, obviously, it's a much more leisurely pace in the sense that I can think about how I want to respond. I can let an idea gestate for me for a period of time before I sit down to write it out. And as I write it out, I can edit it and I can change it and I can let it morph. So that's very different from kind of the fast-paced improv of a face-to-face session. So in that sense, it's more leisurely, but there's also this sense of it never stops. It doesn't have the container of the synchronous session, and so it kind of. Well, I shouldn't use the term bleed, but it bleeds out, and it feels like I'm thinking about it all the time when we're in the mode of, because someone could post something and I'd need to respond to it, and we have an agreement that each of us kind of will post maybe once a day at least, and everyone's very indulgent of one another's schedules, and so if some people can't post for a few days, and that's fine. But we just let each other know in that out of character channel, I'm going to be away from the keyboard for a while, so you guys should move on without me, and then I'll catch up. And so it's very easy to kind of manage all of that. It feels easy. I'm not sure if it is.
Gaming without instant gratification.
I know.
Jose, in this
shocking.
year of our Lord, 2026.
Shocking, I know. Very shocking.
It sounds like a really elaborate version of playing chess by mail.
Yeah. And sometimes it does get that way when we get into a combat situation or we're in a hex crawl, which are not my fortes, but my fellow players are really holding my hand through all of this. So that's all kind of new to me and exciting and interesting.
Well, you have had experience with, it sounds like, multiple different ways of exploring and surfacing some of your character's interiority in the course of that game and others. should we transition to our main topic?
Yes,
Let's do it.
let's do it.
All right, now we actually have to decide which of these we're going to start with because both of you went a little crazy.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, I love it. I really love it.
For our listener, what Ian's referring to is we have a kind of a brainstorm document that's kind of a big blackboard that we just throw ideas down on with our guests before they come on. And yeah, there's a lot written on here.
What is interiority? What is interior to the player character? What do we mean when we say interiority, and what does it mean to express it? I open the question to the table.
I defer to our guest to begin.
Oh no. Okay.
I know I said all of that about how you're not in the hot seat, Elle, and then the very
And then we
first
put you in the
question
hot
is, yeah.
No, I think of interiority in two different ways. I think there are two ways to both experience it in the context of a player character. The first is sort of the common, I think, literary definition of character interiority, where you're talking about their subjective experience, their thoughts and feelings and emotions and hidden opinions, just all of the things that go unseen when the character is making choices and responding to other characters and the world. It's the part of their heads and hearts that we see bleed through into their behavior in ways that are both sometimes opaque to the other players at the table, but which we can make less so with some effort. There's another type of interiority that I wanted to bring up and sort of see what you all think or whether you've experienced something like this before. Because I've definitely had this experience of discovering new parts of my character that are unknown to me, even though I ostensibly created them. And I often find that happens in sort of the gap between the concept, the broad sketch of the character that I've brought to the game that I have in mind, and how they actually play out at the table when they get into the context of the game and the story and the other players' choices. Usually I'm making decisions, especially in early session in a campaign, based on player priorities, like parts of the setting that I think are interesting and I want to explore, characters that I want to have scenes with, etc. And I am sort of finding reasons for my character to do those things that I want to do as a player because I think they'll be fun and interesting and create an interesting experience for everyone at the table. And in the places where those two things don't quite match, where I'm like, I don't know why my character would do this, but they are going to because I want them to. I find that little pockets of interiority grow, and I have to then spend the next session or two plumbing that pocket, finding out why the character made that decision, and that makes my portrayal and my understanding of them richer. So I also think of characters' interiority as a space to explore. I wonder whether that resonates with you all at all.
And isn't that the case for all of us, except maybe on a slightly more extended timeline than the life of a player character? We're all terra incognita to a certain extent, and no plan, no self-conception survives the battlefield. What do you think about this, Jose? What do you think about these two ideas of interiority? I think the first idea that you brought, Elle, as you say, is like pretty self-explanatory and I think it's a safe thing that we can most everyone would agree on. But this idea of discovering the sort of inner territory of the character through the course of play. Listeners might remember that when Gwen was on the show way back in our first episode, we talked about how the process of character creation is ongoing for as long as the character is in the story. What do you think about this, Jose? Have you found character interiority through play? And when you have found it, what did you do?
So the second one that you were talking about, Elle, it makes me think of, there's a whole group of literary theorists called reader response theorists. And one of them, I remember Stanley Fish talks about the interpretive gap, which is like when you're reading, he's talking about reading mostly, when you're reading something, in the process of reading, you're filling in gaps with your imaginatively that aren't delineated by the text. They're just opened almost, like you were saying, that it opens a space within which our imagination, our interpretive capacity can then function. And I love that idea, that sense of possibility, because it is a certain kind of interiority. It's almost an interiority in the player in this case. I was going to say the reader or the viewer, but it's in the player in this case. And I love that interpretation of interiority. I came into this conversation, I think, more with the first one that you were talking about, the subjective experience of a character, for instance, their subjective reactions to the world that they're encountering, not just what they're doing, but what's happening on the inside of them psychologically while they're doing it. And so how do we introduce that? I think it's interesting that, and this might just be me, and you folks can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, a lot of the games that we play are emulating genres more like TV or movie, more cinematic genres, where you see things happening, right? Or you see people acting or dialogue or events, etc. And so I think for myself, it's invited me into a more cinematic kind of describe what's happening kind of mode in my storytelling. Whereas I think you used the term earlier on when you were talking about your poison, Elle, you described yourself as a literary player. And I'm thinking about that. And it's almost now, it's like rather than TV and cinema being our model, it's kind of like what if novels, for instance, because that was the cool thing about novels, right? Is that they allow you to enter the mind of the characters in a way that cinema might not. And so if we start thinking of ourselves as not making TV shows or movies, but simulating novels, then that, I don't know, it gives me more freedom to start thinking about, okay, how do I dip into what my character is subjectively experiencing, on the extreme going to like some kind of stream of consciousness kind of mode. But really, you can do it a lot less. I mean, I think it's going to be a balancing act here of how much interiority do you actually put in. But one of the things I've been noticing, and I've been noticing especially in that play by post thing, because I'm writing something, whether I'm writing in first person or whether I'm writing in third person, I think most of these that I've been writing in the play by post game have been third person accounts. But I can, even with that, I can say, okay, my character is, riding on his horse through a valley or whatever, and I can describe the valley. But then I can also throw in, he feels awe at the setting of the sun. I don't know what, but I can say something about his interior experience and just kind of drop it in the rest of the narration. And it adds some kind of access for me, and maybe, I don't know, for the listener, for the viewer, for the fellow player, into what's going on inside of my character. So those are my first thoughts on this question of two kinds of interiority.
It reminds me a little bit about Shane, when Shane was on the show, about showing and telling, and Shane said essentially, show when you can, tell when you must. it's a little bit semantically backwards, because in your case, you are showing the interiority of the character by talking about it. Whereas if you were to only describe your character's body language in a certain way, you're telling a little bit, because it's just like, oh, the character is making this kind of pose or facial expression, and you're just going to have to take their word for it that that's how they feel, or not their word, but I think you see my point here. Here's the sort of follow up to that initial question. I am in complete agreement with you that there are great swaths of the interior map that are not charted at the start of play. Why is exploring that important? What does the expression of interiority or the exploration of interiority do for us in these kinds of games that we like to play, these sort of narrative forward, story forward games? Can you play a game that works without expressing it at all?
I think you can, certainly. I think I certainly have, especially in games where, it's a one shot, we're doing something quick and dirty, so to speak, and we really do just have to kind of focus on the action and keep things moving, and there feels like there's less time to maybe slow down and show a little bit more of the gooey insides of our characters. But I definitely think that expressing interiority enriches games. I think it makes games better, at least to my sensibilities. And I think it has some practical benefits as well. I think that stories in general, but especially in RPGs, sort of thrive on dramatic irony. This is a way that we create tension by knowing something as players that our characters are not necessarily yet aware of. And that can be something like, oh, my character secretly has a crush on this other character. When we have a scene with those two characters as the focal points, for instance, if we don't know that my character is harboring this crush, then the scene loses a potential layer of excitement and tension that it would have if we do know, even if the source of admiration or the object of admiration doesn't. And I think expressing interiority also helps us have moments that people crave, like these big sort of moments of betrayal or shocking twists. I like to say that twists don't work in RPGs.
That's interesting. Say more about that.
I'm being sort of hyperbolic when I say that, but I think that if you introduce a shocking swerve that no one ever saw coming, or this big moment of betrayal, etc., typically in an RPG, I think you can expect two types of answers from your fellow players, two types of responses. The first response is, what?
WTF.
Huh?
Because from their perspective, there was nothing leading up to this. It's a complete departure from what they understood about the characters or about the situation or the trajectory of the story, and it just doesn't make sense because everything, all of the factors, the emotions, the small slights, whatever that have been building up to this moment were completely internal to whatever character it pertains to, and not accessible to everyone else at the table. The other reaction, I think, is because they probably were getting excited about the things that the story seemed to be leading up toward. And when you introduce a big beat like that, you're kind of putting your hand on the rudder and saying, nope, going my way now, which often doesn't feel great. But I think expressing interiority helps us to build up to those things and make those moments collaborative by giving the players little hooks to engage with.
Well, a movie can get away with things that a novel can't, because a movie can show the actor's pretty face on screen. and it can have this swelling John Williams or Alexander Desplat score to tell us how to feel, right? But a novel doesn't have those luxuries, and so it kind of has to give you, well, there's many different ways to write a novel, but one of the classic ways is to give you this insight into a character, often the main character, so that you can start to relate to them, so that you can start to like have some kind of human or inhuman connection with them, because otherwise they're just some guy who's getting betrayed or proposed to, or, you know, whatever. I'm preparing to run on the Open Hearth. I'm preparing to run a game called Rhapsody of Blood, which is based pretty heavily on the Castlevania video games. So lots of kind of big, high-flying anime action in a gothic horror kind of tone. And one of the big features of the game is that it takes place across several generations. The player characters control bloodlines, not necessarily individual heroes, but sort of these like families or sometimes institutions that produce heroes over the course of generations. And so I've been going back and thinking about like, oh, well, what are some interesting historical moments where I could set this game? And I returned to one of my favorite movies, specifically the director's cut of the Ridley Scott film Kingdom of Heaven, which has a lot of stuff that got cut from the theatrical release of the film that is building up the interiority of the main character as portrayed by Orlando Bloom and his kind of internal struggle with sin, with what it means to be a moral person. The end of the film is this sort of climactic defense of the city from the army as led by Saladin, the great warlord. And it's very exciting, and there's lots of flaming catapult boulders and walls getting knocked down and people getting run through and all of that. But none of it really lands as hard if you don't have all of this stuff building up to it of like, this guy thinks that killing is a mortal sin, will send him to hell. And he's doing it anyway because he knows that everybody in the city is going to die if he doesn't. And that scene does kind of land a little flat for me if you don't have all of this build up or context or sauce leading up to it. It's popcorn otherwise. So I think you're totally right, Elle. I think that you can get through a game and it can provide you the requisite protein and calories and carbohydrates for you to come away and be like, yeah, we played a game. But once you've kind of gotten over that initial challenge of just seeing a game from beginning to end, I think players like us want to start to squeeze a little more juice out of it, so to speak.
I want to circle back, Elle, to something you were saying before about plot twists and betrayals. And I realize that I am still to this day processing a betrayal that I had in a game with you many years ago. I'm sure you know exactly which one I'm talking about. Or maybe you don't. Maybe it wasn't as shocking to you as it shocked me when I did it. It was a game of Urban Shadows. I don't know. Maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago. And your character, I think, had somewhat of was flirting with my character, had a crush on my character, was trying to engage and protect my character in certain ways, but also, as we are in those games, all very kind of manipulative and political. And in the very final scene of the game, and I don't know how long we played, maybe it was a quarterly, or maybe it was just a month, my character basically like threw you under the bus in a way that was very surprising to me, and I think maybe to the table. I don't know if it was surprising to you. You did seem shocked, but maybe I couldn't quite tell how shocked you were. And basically did all this horrible stuff my character did, all this destructive stuff, and basically framed Elle's character for the event. And I've been trying to process it over the years, feeling like I somehow did you wrong. And I'm wondering now, in terms of this question of interiority, whether it felt like you were saying it came out of the blue in my mind, my character was already feeling a lot of ambivalence towards your character, but I didn't know that he was going to betray your character in that way. But I'm curious whether it felt to you at that point like, where the WTF, Jose, what are you doing? Or whether there was something that like that made any sense to it when you experienced it, if you remember what I'm referring to.
I do remember this game very well.
And you still came on our podcast after he sold you out?
She keeps saying that she's forgiven me, but I don't buy it.
Yeah, I release you.
That's professionalism. That's why she's the GOAT, listener.
I release you, Jose. No, I do remember that. I think even though there wasn't, we didn't lay the pavement for that in the way that I was talking about earlier, it didn't upset me, certainly. I think I was surprised, but I think a combination of a few things like helped that land in a way that was really fun for me, even as the person whose character is being betrayed. I remember we did discuss it out of character, I believe. We did a little check-in, which is always great practice. And we were playing a game where I think like part of the buy-in is that you're going to be screwing over other characters and being screwed in return. So I think that was already an expectation that was on the table, even if we didn't know exactly how that would manifest. And thirdly, I think I'm a player that generally makes it clear that I love it when bad things happen to my characters. I just bring that energy. So I was totally down with it, and I think I had probably given signs as such, and we did discuss it, so we're all good.
Oh, good.
I'm glad we were finally able to bury the hatchet on this podcast.
I feel relieved, Elle. Thank you so much.
If you're playing in a Mission Impossible themed game and your Ethan Hunt character has not been betrayed and gone rogue by the end of the game, like, what are we doing here at that point?
I buried a hatchet, it's coming up lavender. The future's unwritten, the past is a corridor. I'm at the exit, looking back through the hall. You are anonymous, I am a concrete wall.
I can't think of any examples, but I'm curious whether there are any types of games or any gaming experiences the two of you have had where you think that expressing interiority was actually a net negative for play. I guess what I really want to know are moments or experiences where like emotional opacity would have been a positive. So I'll like sort of flip the question. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Something that I'm kind of interested in is playing around a little bit with power and status dynamics between player characters. I think usually the consensus is that we make characters who are on an even playing field for the purposes of the story, even if, you know, one character is rich and the other character is poor. But I'm sort of interested in maybe slightly less conventional dynamics. Like, for example, we have been playing Fathom, which takes as an inspiration media like The Matrix or Paprika. These kind of dreamlike worlds that often have a main character who is being brought into it by other characters who are more experienced. And often opaque. At the beginning of The Matrix, Morpheus is opaque to Neo. He is saying, what is The Matrix? And Morpheus is saying, I can't tell you. You have to experience it for yourself. And it's only as that movie and then eventually the sequels go on that we get some of the interiority of Morpheus, really. So I'm kind of interested in playing games like that where one character is the newcomer, or one character is the kind of mentor figure who is playing 4D chess at a level above the rest of the player characters, like, for example, Gandalf compared to the rest of the Fellowship of the Ring. That's kind of a tricky proposition, but I do think it works sometimes as long as everybody is on board and as long as the genre kind of supports it. I played in a game years ago that was not based particularly loosely on the a very, very popular shonen anime series Naruto, which is about ninjas, young ninjas. And one of the most prominent characters in that series is their mentor, is their kind of sensei, who is in and out of the story all the time and who is kind of tuned into the villain's plot in a way that the teenage main characters are not. And I got to play the mentor. There is a playbook in the game that we used that is for that. And I think I probably could have been a little bit more opaque. I think I probably could have withheld some of my interiority from them more, because a big part of those stories is about living up to expectations, training, becoming better, exceeding the expectations that have been set for you with flying colors. And that doesn't really work so well if the approval and approbation of the kind of authority figure are just readily available from the jump. There has to be a bit of a kind of a gradient there, as far as, I'm not letting you into this world, this sort of elite world. Naruto, you're a kid. And besides, you have a demon in your belly. That's a big part of the story.
Believe it!
So if ever there is a player character where there is a kind of a differential in terms of their power or their authority or their status, I think that withholding of interiority, not necessarily from the table, but on a sort of character-to-character basis, can really drive that home, you just don't have access to this space in the way that I do. I advise the listener to use caution when playing around with things like this. You have to be hitting the nail exactly on the head to avoid from, creating sort of messy or icky dynamics with the other players. It has to be a matter of consensus. But I have done that a couple of times, and it has more or less worked.
I'm thinking now to the Mythic Bastion Lands game that I referred to earlier in our conversations. And I came in as the newcomer. I mean, I think I mentioned that the other players had been playing for a year before I came in. So because of the way the game is structured, that means that I'm young. Actually, I'm 20 years old. My character's 20 years old, and theirs are middle-aged.
Sort of a D'Artagnan in that way.
Yeah, the newbie. So there was a status differential there. But what I really want to focus on is that there's one character I decided my character had a crush on, and I cleared this with the other player. But that character that my character has a crush on is kind of the strong, silent type, and very opaque. And in general, my experience of the other characters that I'm with was somewhat opaque. And I think part of me wanted to know about their interiority. And the way I started expressing that was through my character. My character would start probing them. Like, how do you feel about this? I would say that in character, I would ask them, wow, that just happened. What did you, I mean, obviously I would say this in a knightly way, not in a colloquial, 21st
Forsooth,
century way.
Jose.
But I would be asking, forsooth. Yeah, I just think of an example that happened just yesterday or the day before or something in the play-by-post where I'm asking this particular stoic character about what he dreamed the night before, because there's this villainous character that's entering his dreams and tormenting him there. And I wanted to know what was happening with him. And so in that situation, the opacity, is that the word? Opaqueness of the other character is a great kind of open interpretive space, like you were saying before, Elle, on which to draw or to imagine. And the way I was entering that space, or just trying to actualize it a little bit, was by my character drawing out the other characters and saying, what is it? What did you dream last night? Are you okay? Did this person come up? Did they show up? Are you doing all right? And so even though the responses tend to be somewhat laconic, maybe I'll say, because that's in character. But each one is like full. It's like each moment of that laconic communication is very rich for me as a player to receive it from the other player. And so, yeah, shout out to Gabe, who is playing that character. I really enjoyed that dynamic because there's a status differential, but there is also, kind of a love vibe on the part of my character anyways. And then there's also this sense of like this dialectic between openness and closeness and opaqueness and transparency that couldn't happen if we were both completely opaque or if we were both completely transparent. There's no play then. So the play has to happen in the dance between those.
So in that sense, you're kind of saying that this other character's opacity is almost like an offer to you to show your character's interest by trying to get them to open up, to crack them open. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Have you had this sort of experience, Elle? Have you found that some opacity or some, withholding of interiority has been a benefit rather than a detriment?
I haven't, in the sense that you and Jose are talking about, but thinking again about that interpretive gap that we can experience in our engagement with our own characters. I'm thinking about times where the fact that I didn't fully understand or grasp my character's interiority really created a moment of surprise and like delight for me as their player. I'm thinking of a recent short run of a game called The Yellow Curtain that I played.
What's that game like?
Yeah, it is a GM-less game designed by Elle. It's about a group of young women at a theater school who are putting on a performance of the Yellow play, which will, when staged, summon an eldritch entity, the King in Yellow, essentially. It's sort of like the genre, I would say, is like cosmic horror shoujo manga. Like a lot of what you're actually playing out in the game is, having picnics by the creek with your girls or doing rehearsals of the play, having, sapphic dramas and romances. So we're playing out these scenes. We're getting to know the relationships between the girls. They're working on this play, this great work that they're going to put on. And throughout the, I think, 4 or 5 sessions that we played, each girl in their own way started to show doubts about putting on the play. One girl really refused to do it and had to be convinced rather sexily by another girl to go through with it. One girl, my character, was almost like psychotically dedicated to the play, and she was going to do it no matter what. But we all, I think, have these little questions about, well, we know that it's going to summon an eldritch being. They don't necessarily know that. Why the trepidation? And it wasn't until we were actually playing out the play in the final session when someone narrated, there's an archer character who was drawing back their bowstring to shoot another character on stage in the heart. And in the pause after that was narrated, this question just came to my head unbidden. And I asked the table, hold on, is the arrow real? is your character about to murder her character? And even though we hadn't discussed this at all, I don't think it had been on anyone's mind. It just made sense. And we realized that the answer was yes. So between, these cute conversations over beers and like flirtation and all of this, like dancing in graveyards, our characters were plotting to murder one of their own, like kind of behind our backs, even though we're their players. And it was like a very surreal experience. That was very appropriate for the themes of that game, which are all about the blending of reality and fiction.
An arrow fletched with yellow feathers, perhaps. we spoke about this, I think, in our episode 0, Jose, when we were talking about these kind of transcendent moments that go above and beyond preparation, that go above and beyond even skill. When everything, there's some kind of gaming syzygy and everything is just lined up exactly right. And we did liken it to entreating a god to appear. Like you can do the ritual, but you can't force the moment to come. And well, I think it's a testament to your sense, Elle, that you knew that was something you had to run with as opposed to suppress. Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so it's not exactly what you two were getting at, but I think it's a related experience, maybe.
It's a sort of intra character pressure gradient of interiority and opacity. Yeah.
I love the idea that your characters knew stuff that you as players didn't know. Because we always think about it the other way around, right? When you talk about dramatic irony and we know, don't go in that room, blah, blah, blah. We know things that the characters don't. But the idea that the characters might be plotting things that we, the players, haven't yet discovered is, perfect with, like you said, the kind of the reality warping themes of the
Definitely
game.
Added another layer of horror for us as well. Like the scenes that we didn't play out in that game somehow like became terrifying in that moment.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if the question that just suddenly jumps at me, because this was kind of a horror, cosmic horror kind of setting. I wonder if some genres call more for interiority than others. Cosmic horror might be one that could use some interiority to really get the sense of horror happening. It's not just events happening, but it's internal reactions, subjective responses to the kinds of things that are happening, right? And I can imagine some action-focused genres that maybe don't need as much interiority to function well.
Well, we were speaking before about some betrayal, and if you are being very forthcoming with the interiority of your Ilsa Faust, the character played by Rebecca Ferguson in the recent Mission Impossible films, and you are telling everybody, I am planning to betray you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There is a certain, I think, a kind of knee-jerk sensibility that some gamers can have to be like, oh, I want to protect my guy. I want to make the optimal choice. I want to make it through the game, even when the game has come outright and said this is not really about making it through. I do think that there is that kind of, I don't know, to the extent that the character is sort of blurred with the self, like an instinct for self-preservation. So there is a degree of trust, I think, that comes along with offering interiority in that way. The offer of interiority is the second greatest offer after, do you want to sit down and play the game with me?
Yeah.
It has become clear over the course of this conversation. We like it. We like interiority. We like the gooey inside, as you said, Elle. Lots of cornstarch in sort of various flesh-toned colors spurting everywhere. How do you like to go about showing it? How do you like to go about expressing interiority in your gaming? What are some ways that you do that? It could be something as simple as like a gesture, or maybe some like quote unquote some costuming for your character. It could be like a speech pattern or an accent or something like that. Again, go easy with the accents, listener. A little goes a long way. Yeah, how do you guys like to express that?
You want to go first, Elle?
Sure. I think I have several answers to this question, so I'll just start with one, and I'd love to hear your answers as well, or maybe we can circle back to me. For me, as a quote-unquote literary player, I really find myself relying often on just narrating what is going on inside my character. I will just say, if this is a difficult decision for them, like the two sides of the moral quandary that they're weighing. And I might also, supplement that with like how it's showing on their face or whatever. But I think especially when it's an important inflection point for my character, and I want the stakes to be really clear to the others at the table, I think there's nothing wrong with just saying it.
The example that's jumping up into my mind right now is a place where I feel like I kind of like froze a little bit in a game with the two of you last week in the Fathom game, where it was one of these high stakes moments, and where my character had to make a decision about whether to be seduced by this potentially villainous, potentially friendly creature.
A frenemy.
Frenemy, yes. I think what I said at that moment was, I think I need to roll for inner conflict, referring to
right.
the move in Hearts of Wulin. There's a mechanism there, but there was no mechanism here in this game for this to guide me. So at that moment, I wanted to express the inner conflict somehow. And then I remember, Elle, you said in the chat, you said, "Stewie, he's trying to kill us!" exclamation point. And it freaked me out when you put that in there. It's like, wait, is that your character talking to my character in the chat? It was ultimately, I made the decision, and I tried to convey something about his ambivalence. I guess I could have said something like he's ambivalent, and maybe that's what I meant when I said I need to roll for inner conflict. I was trying to telegraph that my character was in conflict. I think it was pretty obvious that my character was.
You said, and I quote, "You're being really hot right now."
I said that to the frenemy. So I think I did try to telegraph the conflict, but there was a moment there where I was like, okay, this is such an important moment for my character, and maybe even for the storyline, since we're getting close to the culmination. I didn't know in that moment how to convey that. And so, yeah, that's the first thing that comes up for me, a moment where I felt like I kind of struggled to convey, especially an internal conflict. I could have said, well, Stewie feels this way, but he also feels this way. But that didn't feel like it could fit into the drama, the immersive drama of that moment. So I think I don't know if I stumbled, but I hesitated at that moment.
I definitely think you landed it, for what it's worth.
I think so too.
Okay. Oh, good. But my interior experience.
Something that I find I really like to do, and this is coming back to what you guys were talking about novelistic gaming as opposed to cinematic gaming, is that I like to use the little conjunctive devices that are used in dialogue in novels. I will often punctuate a sentence that is especially, that I mean to be especially scathing by saying he sneered or he wailed or he something, and it's not a huge commit on my part. It doesn't take very much effort to do, but I do think that it really can underline in a game where people often have their cameras off, and often, and this is on top of any other different kind of difficulty that people have in interpreting social situations, which many of us do. I find that just underlining what I just said with that kind of third-person omniscient gesture can really go a long way towards eliminating the kind of unhelpful ambiguity that keeps people from being on the same page, that keeps people from kind of being in sync as far as the fiction and the interiority of the character. Like what do they really intend? What do they really want? How have they shown those things? If I make it explicit, as you said, Elle, by saying he stormed off after that exchange, that's sort of putting it into the text that he's angry or he's frustrated.
I think that's a really useful technique too for players who are less, I suppose, performative in their approach to play. Like, not everyone likes to do a character voice. Not everyone's changing their cadence as they speak, or putting a little growl in their voice when their character is angry. Sometimes then players like that can have a harder time expressing their character's emotions or interiority. But doing, as you say, Ian, like, he sneered, he scowled, she chortled, I think is really...
He swooned.
Yes, that's a favorite of mine. I think that's really clear, really useful, and like you said, it's not a big commitment, and is showing your character's vulnerability without the player having to step out of any comfort zone they might be trying to stay firmly within the bounds of.
There's a podcaster that I listen to, a creative writing podcaster, Savannah Gilbo, and she suggested doing this little exercise where you take a book, a novel that you like, where you just open it up and you read a paragraph and you look for interiority and how it's being expressed in the novel or in that particular paragraph. And that's been really interesting, of picking up different books and just opening them to a random page and looking at the interiority. And one of the things that I've noticed in doing that, and I've kind of incorporated it, like I just wrote something for the Play by Post game this afternoon, where I was describing kind of a, for lack of a better term, a domestic moment between my character and the character he's kind of in love with. They were sewing armor together, very domestic. So I was describing what they were doing and kind of using kind of some of those adverbs and adjectives that you were talking about, but that's still cinematic to some extent with little tastes. As I was talking about, I said my character basks in the easy companionship of the moment. That's something that couldn't be captured on a camera cinematically, because that's a direct description of an internal state. Tossing in sentences like that has been an interesting little experiment for me when I'm writing. It's easier to do now, because I play by post, so they're written things. So I can think about, oh, okay, I just wrote something. Is there interiority here? How could I put in a little bit more if I wanted to? And I'm kind of experimenting with that a little bit more. So whether you can do that on the fly, I don't know. But whether I can do that on the fly, I don't know.
You make me want to try. You make me want to try the next time that I'm, when I'm playing in Danny's game on Friday night. You make me want to try to. There's so much that is contained in just a small sentence like that. I want to be economical like that. I want to sort of get a lot across in a small package. So ask me again the next time we see each other, Jose. And well, the next time we see each other is tomorrow night, so that's not going to work. But
it's tomorrow night. That'll be soon.
But
all three of us.
I'm going to give that a shot. I'm going to try to make that kind of speak it into existence, right? To speak it into the universe.
It does help me, I think, to think a little bit about where my character is coming from in between sessions, so that when it comes time to maybe interject or insert a sentence like that, I know what he's actually experiencing. I have a sense of what he might experience, rather than trying to come up with all of that in the moment. So I think I tend to have a habit between sessions to think about, okay, how is my character feeling about character A? How is my character feeling about character B? Is there any ambivalence? Is there any conflict? And then so that I'm a little bit more prepped for when the opportunities arise.
I think also just like, in addition to adjectives and adverbs and little narration tags, just the words that we use to describe things. Like if both of our characters are talking about a bowl of pasta, but I'm calling it meat slop, I think like the other character comes to understand something about my feelings about the dish or about the person who prepared it, right? Even if that's not what my character is saying, if I, as a player, am like narrating them, reaching across the table to grab the bowl of meat slop, some of it sloshing onto the floor, without saying exactly what my character is feeling, it gives, I think, a sense of emotional depth there. So you can also think about describing things creatively in that way as well.
He was a hairy bear, he was a scary bear. We beat a hasty retreat from his lair and described him with adjectives.
Whoa! Boy, that was one big ugly bear.
I suppose I would like to talk about how to encourage more expression of interiority, like in your fellow players. Jose, you sort of did touch on that earlier with your example from the Bastion Land. But I think many people do have this sense that sometimes they might want to express more of their character's interiority, but they feel like it's too self-indulgent or like they're taking up time that would be better spent at the table. But like, how do we create an atmosphere where everyone feels not only comfortable doing so, but I guess comfortable trying to draw that out of their fellow players?
Something that we've discussed in previous and recent episodes is the players' not only ability, but I would go as far as to say prerogative to initiate some of the tools and procedures that we sometimes reserve for the GM, such as painting the scene. And I did this recently in that Friday night game with Danny. As you know, Jose, and probably you know by this point, Elle, I like to play a player character who is an instigator. I like to start fires because they often make people do interesting things. And I indulged in my pyromaniacal tendencies in this game, and then I asked the rest of the table to paint the scene regarding the results of what had happened and what they were doing about it. And I think there was a little bit of a hitch. I think there was a little bit of a like, oh, we weren't expecting for that prompt to come from a fellow player. And I certainly felt like, oh, it's possible that I might be overexposing here. Danny, if you're listening, DM me and tell me if I was overextending. But I think it worked. I think it like came off well, and there was a lot of opportunity for the other player characters to describe what they were doing, and in doing so to kind of illustrate what was important to them, or to, at the very least, to kind of further embody whatever vibe they were curating for that character. There was a specific moment where I basically made eye contact with another player character while I was reaching out to touch the big red button. And that player character, held the eye contact and didn't do anything, indicating that they wanted me to touch the big red button and they wanted to stand back while I did it, which tells you something about that player character, I think. That's my thing that I'm hype on right now. There's my, this deep into the episode, my secondary poison is initiating a paint the scene as a player is so fun, and there's so much like opportunity for that, I think.
I did that last week in a game that I'm in, a different game. I won't get into the details of it, but I was entering a scene with my character, and I just wanted to include the rest of the table. And I asked them, will you help me paint the scene? And I came up with a paint the scene question, one of those typical paint the scene questions, like, what about this? I can't remember exactly what it was, but what about this scenario shows that, this place is a low-life bar or something. I don't know what it was. And everyone jumped in and did it. I'll have to ask Shane whether I overextended or not, but most people are pretty indulgent with me. But this question about how we as players can not only express our own interiority, but can also create a table wherein others are free, at least, or invited to express the interiority of their own characters, I think is an interesting one. Does anything come up for you, Elle, around that question?
Going back to my just say it ethos, I think I'm also a just ask sort of person. When another character makes a choice that doesn't quite fit with what I expected or doesn't sort of jive with my interpretation of that character so far, I have no problem just going, oh, wait, really? Why is that? And I'm always asking in a way that's not judging, but probing, right? Like, I really want to know why, because either this player has a different sort of view of their character than I do, and I want to be let in on what they're seeing so that I can help support it. Or maybe there's something at play or a variable that I missed that's another interesting story thread to pick up on. There's almost always something interesting there. And I think of the mechanic in Good Society, Regency Jane Austen role-playing game, a GM-less game where one of the core mechanics is something called the monologue token. Every role-playing phase, each player gets a single monologue token that they can spend during a scene to prompt another player to describe their character's inner monologue at that moment.
Perfect.
And those narrations are always so interesting. The player who is doing the narration, who's doing the monologue, always loves it. It's like the killer app of that game, I think. And my life really changed when I realized I can just do that. I don't have to be playing Good Society to do that. I can always play a monologue. Exactly.
Or give one to somebody else, right?
It seems like such a gift for a player who is not maybe so predisposed to that kind of thing, because it puts kind of an upper limit on how much of it you need to do. Here, you've got this one token. All you have to do is one monologue. All you have to do is one show of interiority. And it can be as, from what I understand about what you're saying, Elle, it can be as brief as you like.
Indeed, it doesn't have to be a long show-stopping monologue. But I think the other sort of genius part of that mechanic is that it encourages players to always have that in the back of their mind, like to always have their finger on the pulse of their character's interiority. So I think knowing that that is a possibility, that any time someone might ask you, what's Lord George II thinking right now? Yeah, you always, it centers emotions in the game with a very light touch, though, in a way that doesn't add more pressure. It's just, it creates an atmosphere of curiosity, which I think is the important thing about getting people to share the vulnerable parts of their character.
Yeah, invitation, space, curiosity. Yeah, because no one wants to be put on the spot.
Yeah, there will be a quiz.
There will be a quiz later on your interiority. And it seems like what you were talking about before, Elle, about just asking is like parallel to what I was saying, that my character sometimes will ask another character what's going on with you, right? And the difference is that you're doing it in the out-of-character channel, and I'm doing it in the in-game channel. To go back to that Discord mechanic or setup framework that we have for the play-by-post game. But it can happen in either channel, right? And it's just expressing kind of a genuine curiosity. Either your character's expressing that genuine curiosity, or you as a player expressing that genuine curiosity. And it seems like it's part of being a fan of the other characters to want to know what's
for sure. I think there's a part of it too where you can be a little bit of an instigator, as Ian likes to be.
I'm raising my eyebrows. Listener, I'm raising my eyebrows in a devilish sort of way.
Because I also like to ask these questions to sort of rib and prod a little bit. Like, is this what this character really believes? Is he hiding something here? And sometimes the answer is no, he's being straightforward, and that's also useful to know. But sometimes it also sparks something and gives the other player an idea of another layer that could be here in this interaction. And maybe it is more interesting if my character doesn't really believe what he's saying and, is fielding loyalties to somebody else, even though they're professing, devotion to the king,
And why would that be the case, right? It opens up a sort of there's a new fruitful void that is opened up.
Exactly. Or
when that happens.
More space to explore.
We close normally, Elle, with this Pearl of Wisdom segment. I think there's already been a number of pearls. We've already given a lot of advice. But the question that I had around this closing segment, and see if it registers with you, Elle, is what's a question that players could ask themselves mid-session in order to help them stay connected with their character's inner world?
I'm not thinking of one particular question. I suppose I'm thinking of a circumstance in which you ask a question. I think as players, especially in face-to-face or online real-time games, I think we all have experiences, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, Jose, where you were making a difficult choice in character and had to pause to sort of process it and metabolize it. Sometimes we make those choices without pausing and metabolizing, right? We just do what it feels right in the moment, and sometimes it feels a little off afterward. And I think our instinct as players, or I should use I statement, my instinct as a player sometimes is to gloss over that little bit of weirdness and like smooth it down in the narrative, sort of pretend it didn't happen. But I think those moments are actually ripe for the type of interrogation I was just talking about that you might direct to another player. You can interrogate your own character in that way as well and go, well, I as a player experienced that moment as a little hiccup in my, improv skills, maybe, but that was a choice that my character made. So let me think about why they did that. And just ask your character, why did you do that?
Why? Why?
And also what occurs to me is that you can ask yourself that question, but not pressure yourself to come up with a definitive answer. Because it may be that your character doesn't know exactly why they're doing something or what they feel about something in particular. And so feels like I have to have a call out to our fellow player Casey right now, and also to you, Elle, around the diegetic pause, which both of you know what I'm referring to. Sometimes in a scene, Casey will pause before responding to something that someone has said. You don't have to have a definitive answer when you ask yourself, how does your character feel about a particular thing, or what's their perspective or their subjectivity with respect to a certain event going on. It might not be clear.
Well, I'm feeling pretty definitive at the moment. And what I feel definitively is that this has been such a lovely experience. Elle, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is so lovely and really thought-provoking. I'm going to be tossing and turning tonight, thinking about these questions.
There are many thoughts yet to be provoked. So hopefully, if you're interested, you'd like to come back on the show at some point.
If you'd have me, Jose and I have buried the hatchet, so we might as well be friends moving forward.
Yeah, we'd come back to see how that hatchet is coming along.
It's been very reparative for me, Elle. I promise not to impersonate you and frame you.
No, I would love for you to do that again.
You heard it here first, sweet listener. We have it. We have auditory evidence. Elle, your work, and if I may say, you do work. Where can people find it?
Oh gosh, you can find all of my writing at bloodygorgeous.card.co, which has links to all of my writing for TTRPGs, as well as some editing work that I've done. And otherwise, I'm just kind of around playing and running games.
Scroll down, listener, you'll find that link in our show notes, of course. Is there anything that you'd like particularly to plug at the moment, Elle? Something that you're working on, something that you are really excited about?
Sure. Currently, I am working as the lead editor for an RPG called Come On In, which is inspired by True Detective and True Blood and other kind of Southern Gothic horror media. It's a game for 2 players and a GM, where the players portray detectives of the Louisiana State Police looking into a grisly murder connected to vampires. It's a really flavorful and gorgeously put together game, and it is forthcoming later this year from Mastodon EXP.
Okay, that sounds like if you would indulge us, Elle, would you consider running that for Jose and I at some point?
I would love to.
Please.
We'll have a little extra on the show, little actual play.
I should mention it's designed by Wes Franks, who is very talented.
Listener, thanks for tuning in to A Different Kind of Hex, Episode 9. And thanks again to Elle for her insight into the creamy nougat center of character interiority. We make this show in conjunction with the Open Hearth, an online community and pickup league for playing tabletop role-playing games, with an emphasis on player safety, inclusivity, and, of course, agency. And the Open Hearth has an event coming up in October called The Shared Hearth, a celebration of tabletop gaming in all its forms, and specifically meant to bring new players into the hobby and knock down barriers to entry. If you've been listening and you've been looking for an opportunity to get into a game for yourself, this is a great moment, as well as if you have someone in your life who you'd like to bring into gaming. The Open Hearth can be found on YouTube, Blue Sky, Mastodon, and Tumblr. And you can find the music that I wrote for the show at lloydeves.bandcamp.com with assists this week from David Bowie, Phoebe Bridgers, and others. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a very special episode. Rather than featuring a third guest, I got to welcome a guest as José joined me in the studio live for the very first time. Until then, listener, keep playing.